One of the narratives we heard all offseason was that Miami and Tyler Van Dyke were going to take over college football. One ESPN article said, quote, "Miami football has been waiting 2 decades for a quarterback like Tyler Van Dyke. The guy had unbelievable hype. He set the college football world on fire the last 6 games of 2021 and was looking like a future franchise NFL quarterback. He became just a second Power 5 quarterback during the playoff era to throw over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns in 6 straight games, and the only other guy was Joe Burrow. There was good reason to believe that the Tyler Van Dyke hype was legit, but unfortunately, it has all come crashing down. The Miami Hurricanes are in a terrible spot. Van Dyke has not played well, and this past weekend, he played so bad, he was benched. It looks like the Hurricanes might be going in a different direction with the quarterback spot, and the Tyler Van Dyke hype might be done as quickly as it got started. In today's video, we're going to do a deep dive into Tyler Van Dyke's career, talk about his rise, how he got so big at Miami, and what has ultimately caused him to go downhill. We're also going to talk about what I think is going to happen to him next in the future of the Canes program. But before we can get started, nearly 80% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel, so quickly be sure to hit the subscribe button, leave a like if you want to support the video, let me know a player or a topic I can cover next, and turn on notifications so you never miss when I upload. Now, let's get started and talk about what went wrong for Tyler Van Dyke. In order to understand what went wrong for Van Dyke, we first need to go back in time. 2 or 3 years old is when Tyler would first throw a football, as his father said it was instantly clear he had talent. Football ran in the family's blood, as his grandfather was a coach at Hofstra, and many of his other family members played sports at the collegiate level. Eventually, the family would settle down in Connecticut, a place not known for producing big-time football talent, especially at the quarterback spot. In the last 15 years, the state's only produced 4 four-star quarterbacks. The first one was Jordan Reed, who went to Florida, the second was Tyson Pomachan, who went to Clemson, and the third was Drew Pine, who went to Notre Dame. The fourth was obviously TVD. TVD began playing football in 2nd grade as a tight end, and quickly moved to the quarterback spot by 3rd grade. He idolized Tom Brady growing up and began to spend more and more time playing the game. When he played quarterback, he naturally had the physical traits to be big time, and that combining with a good work ethic meant he was probably going to have a high ceiling. But things got off to a slow start, as he did not get to start until his junior year of high school. He went to the prestigious Suffield Academy, I hope I said that right, and would blow up during his junior season. He threw for 2,260 yards and 21 touchdowns while leading his team to lots of victories. This led many college scouts to take notice, and they were not new to the area, as just a couple of years ago, they were there to scout Christian Wilkins, who eventually became a 5-star recruit. This time, TVD was the #1 player in the state and was ranked as a 4-star quarterback, but where would he go? Well, he earned attention from a number of college programs, including Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Boston College, Louisville, Pitt, and Syracuse. Eventually, Van Dyke would choose Miami over UCLA, Syracuse, and Purdue because he thought it was a place where he could win big and be remembered. 2 of his wide receivers also went to big-time schools, as one went to Penn State and the other went to Syracuse, and the one from Syracuse really lobbied for him to come there. But ultimately, Miami won him over. Rivals said, quote, "Tyler did a lot of trips and had a lot of visits and had a lot of offers. Miami came in a little bit late, although when Tyler first went down there, he was really impressed. I do feel like in his last visit to Miami last week, he was very impressed and he felt it was the place for him. The long wait was over for TVD, and his dad was very impressed with him. He always talked about how his son had incredible traits. He was patient, always understood the situation he was in, and was extremely level-headed. He had to wait 3 years to start a game in high school because he reclassified, and he understood patience and working hard. Once he eventually did start, he was terrific. He passed for more than 4,600 yards and 39 touchdowns in 2 years starting, which was pretty crazy for a backup. He even won a state championship as a senior, and little did anyone know this would not be the last time he would shock the football world. Van Dyke was also sold on Miami because of his relationship with offensive coordinator Dan Enos. Enos had developed Brandon Allen at Arkansas and Cooper Rush at Central Michigan, and both of those guys are currently in the NFL. Van Dyke would have to earn his spot in the system. Van Dyke went under the radar in the college football world, but scouts compared him to Kirk Cousins and were extremely high on him. One scout said, quote, "What stands out right away with him is #1, he has great size for a quarterback. He's a 6'4" guy that's developed. Right now he's 215 pounds, which is up 20 pounds from last year. He has tremendous throwing ability, has a strong arm that's very accurate, and he's really polished in the way he throws the ball and some of his mechanics. The last piece is he's a tremendous athlete, and he also played varsity basketball and baseball. He's got everything, and there's no question in my mind he'll continue to develop and improve from here. This guy was obviously a big deal, as according to 24/7 Sports, he was a 4-star recruit, the number 7 pro-style quarterback, and the 222nd best player in the class of 2020. He was leaving the snowy winters of Connecticut for the warm beaches of Miami. How would he do? When Tyler arrived at Miami, he became best friends with wide receiver Xavier Restrepo, and they got in the habit of going to the practice facility at 11 p.m. to throw the ball around. At the time, they were both backups and needed a way to stand out. Van Dyke said, quote, "I hate losing and I hate doing bad. Back then, I was just trying to do what I could do to get on the field, just not caring, gripping the ball, and doing what I do best." Pretty much no one talked about him after the 2020 season, as he would redshirt, and he became sort of an afterthought amongst Miami fans. That was because they brought in a blue-chip recruit by the name of Jake Garcia. He had flipped from USC, and he had seemingly unlimited potential. Going into the 2021 season, Van Dyke would barely beat out Garcia for that backup job, and D'Eriq King was obviously the starter. Miami and King got off to a very rough start, with losses to Alabama and Michigan State early on, and then when King got hurt, it was next man up. He was never supposed to be the leader that season. He opened the year on the bench, and many believed that Garcia would get that nod, but no, it was Van Dyke. Expectations were really low for him, as fans had pretty much given up on the season, so how would he end up doing? Well, he got off to a slow start against Virginia and North Carolina, as he had 3 picks against the Tar Heels, and they lost both of those games. Then, though, he took off. Against number 18 NC State, he threw for 325 yards and 4 touchdowns, as they beat the number 18 ranked Wolfpack. He beat his second-ranked team in a row, as he'd then throw 426 yards and 3 touchdowns in a win over number 17 Pitt, and then he'd throw for 389 yards and 3 more scores against Georgia Tech. He'd throw for a career-high 4 touchdowns and 300 yards in a loss to Florida State, and then would once again finish the season on a hot note, throwing for 350 yards and 3 scores against Virginia Tech, and 381 yards and 3 touchdowns against Duke. The Canes had won 5 out of those 6 matchups, and he was terrific. He threw for 300 yards and at least 3 touchdowns in 6 straight games, and he became the second Power 5 quarterback in the playoff era to do that. The other was obviously Joe Burrow. The passing offense went from 19th to top 10, jumping nearly 44 yards per game. Van Dyke would finish the season with 2,931 yards, with 25 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. He only started 8 of those games, and had he started all 12, Miami could have had an even better season. The Hurricanes were originally supposed to play in the Sun Bowl, but they obviously had to opt out because they didn't have enough players. So how did this guy go from a backup to a national sensation? His roommate says it was a different sport. It was golf. Apparently that sport suits his personality perfect, as it requires a calm demeanor, a steady hand, and a willingness to forget about bad shots. Those are the same skills a quarterback needs to have, and apparently Van Dyke would play 9 holes every Thursday before a game just to relax and clear his head. I guess it worked. Expectations for Miami and Van Dyke would become hysterical going into 2022. Unfortunately, offensive coordinator Rhett Lashley had left to take the job at SMU, so in came Josh Gaddis from Michigan. They also got rid of Manny Diaz as the head coach, and Mario Cristobal came in from Oregon. Many were saying this was the chosen one and the best quarterback Miami had seen in years, and the pieces appeared to be in place for Miami to have a huge season. They had the coach, the money, and the quarterback. With Van Dyke's great finish to the season, he was a projected top quarterback prospect, with some having him in the top 10. Mel Kiper had this to say, quote, "He's not lacking anything. He can move, he can avoid, he sees the field, and he makes good decisions. He's got the size, the arm, and the want to. But 11 starts doesn't tell me enough." He was basically saying this guy has done everything, but he just needs to prove he can do it over the long haul. It seemed like everything was good on paper, but behind the scenes, there was a scheme change that might be the reason why things have gone south for him. Gaddis would install a new pro-style offense, asking Van Dyke to become more of a drop-back passer instead of being in the RPO system. Van Dyke was apparently a fast learner though, and no one really batted an eye at that. Well, now people's eyes are definitely on him in Miami, as they have both struggled horrendously this year. In week 1, Van Dyke would go 13 of 16 for 193 yards and 2 scores against Bethune-Cookman, but that was against low competition, so it didn't really tell us anything. In week 2, they struggled out of the gate against Southern Miss, and while they ended up winning 30-7, Van Dyke was largely unimpressive, throwing for 261 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Week 3 would be a huge moment for Miami, as they now have their first tough competition. This game would come on the road against number 24 Texas A&M, and in this game, all the flaws were on full display. Van Dyke went 21 of 41 for 217 yards without a touchdown or an interception. He was missing throws, his receivers were dropping balls, and the offense could not get going. They had to settle for 3 field goals, and Van Dyke's confidence just looked shook in that game. They ended up losing 17-9, and there was now skepticism around TVD, but he'd surely bounce back the next week against Middle Tennessee. Right? Wrong. The Blue Raiders came to town and put Miami in their place. Van Dyke went 16 of 32 for 138 yards with a touchdown and 2 interceptions. One of those was a pick 6, and as the offense continued to get stale and they fell further behind, Cristobal decided to throw in his backup, Jake Garcia. The top 10 prospect who had set the world on fire was now benched against a bad team, was now benched against Middle Tennessee. Garcia took over and put a spark in the offense, and according to analytics, and just by the look, Garcia might be the better fit for this system. In a world where college football quarterbacks have such a short leash, Cristobal is going to go with the guy who has the best chance to win games, and right now Van Dyke is not getting it done, and his time at Miami might already be over. We've seen a very similar situation with Haynes King at Texas A&M, and just like when TVD got his chance as a backup last year, Garcia got it now, and he might take it and run with it. Right now, through 4 games, Van Dyke has 809 yards with 4 touchdowns and 3 picks, which is a far cry from the numbers he put up last year. So what has gone wrong for him? Well, I have 3 reasons. The first one is the scheme change. He had to basically learn a whole new playbook and switch away from everything he was successful at, and it looks like there was a steep learning curve to that, and he just can't seem to grasp it. This has hurt him tremendously. Secondly, the wide receivers have not helped. It's no secret that Miami has a horrific wide receiving core, and with them dropping passes and not helping out, it makes his numbers look worse, and he's not getting any help. Thirdly, Van Dyke might have had too much hype, and he might have crumbled under the pressure. Yes, he was terrific last year, but most of those games came when Miami was not in the spotlight, and when there was really no expectation. Now that he has all these high expectations, the weight of the world, and an NFL future on his shoulders, it might have just been too much for him, and he lost some of that confidence that he once had. I really can't answer what has gone wrong, but I really do like Tyler Van Dyke, and I hope he gets it together. If Garcia ends up winning the job, I think there's a chance that Van Dyke enters the portal, as he will no longer have that high NFL stock. I can't even begin to predict where he would go, but I will say the former coordinator Dan Enos, who recruited him to Miami, is now at Maryland. With Talia Tagovailoa likely leaving, maybe he goes to Maryland. I cannot answer anything though, as maybe Van Dyke starts next week and puts all of this to rest. But what do you guys think? If you're a Miami fan, what has gone wrong for Tyler Van Dyke? What are your expectations for the remainder of the season? And if you're a fan of another school, give me your thoughts on Van Dyke, another player or prospect I could take a look at in my next video. And before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about the quick rise and fall of Haynes King. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.